I'm Edie Lush and I'm inside the Hub Culture studio. Really pleased now to be joined by Peter Maurer. He's the president of the International Red Cross. Now, you've done an interesting poll on millennials, what they think about war and peace. Tell me why and what they do think about war and peace.
We did it because the millennials are the next generation of people we want to work and want to engage in our work on mitigating and assisting people in times of war and conflict and violence. So we care about what the next generation thinks about warfare, about the rules of war, about the likelihood of warfare, and what they do against or how they engage with regard to war. So we wanted to have a more precise view on what their value system is and how we can engage with them.
So what did it tell you? What did the poll tell you?
The poll is maybe at first sight a little bit inconclusive, or you see that millennials don't think fundamentally different from any other part of the populations. War is one of the top 10 concerns, which also include unemployment, climate change, global warming, other societal issues, so no surprise at first sight. When we look a little bit closer, it's interesting how unsecure millennials are on how to think about war. On the one side, they fear the likelihood of war. They almost consider nuclear weapons, their use as inevitable. And on the other hand, they are against nuclear weapons and they want peace. So the question is a little bit, what do we do out of such a survey? And I think the important thing is now also to engage with millennials and see what kind of action can come out of such a survey, which is not completely conclusive. And maybe the second thing I wanted to highlight is that millennials who live today in peaceful societies distinguish themselves in their consideration on war and climate change quite fundamentally from those who live in warfare and war contexts and violent contexts.
And what about those who live within those more violent contexts?
Those who live in more violent contexts care more about the rules of war, about international humanitarian law, about decent, humane treatment of detainees, about the prohibition of torture. Those outside war are more permissive with regard to torture, to ill treatment, to a lot of other things. Those outside warfare consider climate change and global warming a much more important issues, while those inside contexts of war consider really war and the rules of war absolutely central.
What about those who are in areas which are experiencing the effects of climate change? Do they view things differently from those who are in areas who may not be having such extreme effects?
I think there is an overall recognition that climate change affects all of us. It's a global issue, and so it transcends the divisions between more peaceful society and societies in war. But of course, when you are in war, then climate change comes second or third or fourth. When you have breathing and thinking space, then climate change becomes a much more important issue. What I see from my trips also to some of the contexts is when you look at the dynamics of war, violence and climate change, that this becomes increasingly a reality for people in contexts in which we work.
Now, you've recently come back from the Horn of Africa. I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about what you're thinking there in terms of the preparedness that you have to get ready for in terms of the crises that might well come, given what we know.
Well, I felt surprisingly to me as well during that trip that climate change is extremely present. So it's not something of a distant future. Communities, elders in communities, when they talk to us, when they talk to me, climate change is top. And what they say is interesting. When I ask them what does climate change mean, they say we have been used to droughts, but we are not used what happens today and what we call climate change, and that's the quick alternation of too much and too little water. Crisis is because of drought, and crisis is because of flooding. And this is a pattern which we see in the Sahel, in the Lake Chad, in the Horn of Africa repeating, and which force us to change quite fundamentally the way we think about our humanitarian response, because we need to combine a adaptation to the needs of people with the adaptation to the effects of climate change.
Finally, our audience is around the world. If you could give them something to act on, speaking directly to them, what would it be? What would you like them to do?
Well, I always think two things belong together. One, it is good to do what you can do towards some of the big challenges in the world. It doesn't matter actually which one you pick, whether it is climate change, unemployment,
poverty,
jobs, poverty,
feed,
humanitarian
health.
work. But I think in today's world, and this is by the way also one of the recognitions after the poll, is that the tweet culture basically disempowers people and the whole generation. You think that you have done something by tweeting, but you don't. And I think my message is really go beyond tweet and do something concrete and connect your analysis, your recognition, your concern, connect it with concrete, physical, concrete action to cope with some of these broad challenges.
Peter, thank you so much for stopping by the Hub Culture Studio. Last year it was freezing cold. This year it's a little bit warmer. Next time we'll make it just right.
Or even warmer. Thank you.
Thank you.